and he's using deportation as a way to enhance his position with all of those right-wingers out there who do not want this country to be a country of people coming from other places. It's outrageous, it is horrible, and we've got to make sure that we do everything that we possibly can, because I think he's up to creating martial law. He even alluded to
we got the National Guard here.
What do you think
National Guard for what?
What do you think about the National Guard being here, Trump deploying them and not our own governor?
Well, the thing about it is, I don't know why they're here with guns. Whom are they going to shoot, and for what? Are you going to shoot a kid running away just because they're afraid of them? Are you going to shoot a protester because you don't like what they're saying? Why the guns? Why are these guns here? That's my question. I don't get why the guns have to be here. We're a sanctuary city. We know Trump doesn't like us. We know that he's going to try to use us as an example. He's going to try to goad us so that he has a martial law.
All right, folks, so yesterday night, we, of course, covered the story of Trump deploying the National Guard to the city of Los Angeles to quell the immigration riots that have broken out after it turns out a bunch of criminals rallied to try to protect the other criminals. And I don't think it is super surprising to find out as of this morning that, of course, the Democrats are crying about it. They're whining, and that should be expected because, of course, Democrats whine and cry about literally everything. Although I gotta say, even I, of all people, am a little surprised at how insane their reaction is. Because after all, the decision to deploy the Guard yesterday is obvious, basic common sense, considering riots have already erupted. There were obvious signs, even at the time of the decision, that the crowds were getting out of control. Late into the night, we saw ample evidence that, yes, that was indeed the case. And of course, let's not forget, by the way, many Democrats are claiming to say, right, they want to introspect after the 2024 election. They got to be more moderate, a little bit less crazy. Of course, Gavin Newsom, after governing for years as one of the most far-left governors in the entire country, is now trying to make the 2028 pivot to a sensible moderate who talks to the other side and stands for basic common sense. Yeah, when it comes to the very basic common sense of law and order, right? Not having mass looting and assault and fires and violence on your streets. Apparently, it stops there because not only, guys, are Democrats criticizing the Trump decision to deploy the National Guard, they are, of course, going so far as to say, this is a fascist takeover. He's sending the military on the streets. I have unironically seen, guys, prominent Democrats comparing this entire situation to Tiananmen Square, okay? The fact that they have to send the National Guard to tell people to stop looting stores and burning tires in the middle of the road, this is just like Tiananmen in 1989. Yeah, nonetheless, we'll tell you all about it in today's video because, folks, the Democrats simply never learn. Mostly peaceful protests are back. This is, of course, the situation that we are seeing out of Los Angeles. What a cesspool that place is. I gotta say, as someone who grew up there 18 years of my life, kind of honestly tragic to see one of the most beautiful areas in our country, Ronald Reagan's hometown, to be turned into all of this. But anyways, we'll get into it. First though, folks, do us a favor. If you enjoy the content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe if you are new. You subscribing is the best way to support these videos and ensure that we can keep bringing you this coverage. And with that said, so before we get into showing you the exact Democrat statements between Gavin Newsom, Adam Schiff about martial law, guys, this is martial law, I first of all want to show you the receipts, some of the videos of what's been happening in the past 3 days out of Los Angeles, just to give you an idea. Okay, so let's ask that open question, right? Do you think Trump is justified in this case to deploy the National Guard or not, right? I think that's a pretty fair question. Now, with that in mind, I want to also be clear about this. For the sake of not repeating clips, I'm actually going to show you videos that are not from our past videos, so that way no one can sit there and say, oh, you're just taking one video out of context. One person is doing something. No, there's a mountain of different cases of rioting, of looting, of attacks, of assaults against law enforcement happening. So many, in fact, we can show you a bunch and never have to repeat them. But just to give you an idea, yesterday out of Paramount, California, after on Friday, we already had violent protesters breaking glass, storming into a federal facility and vandalizing people's vehicles and try to breach the insides. Yesterday, of course, we covered out of Paramount people throwing rocks at moving cars of law enforcement. Fire started. They're throwing freaking cement bricks, all this stuff. Well, check this out. So this is out of Paramount. Chaos unfolds where dozens of activists storm onto the freeway, okay, in other parts of the country. That's called a highway or an interstate, an active road, desperately trying to stop this federal bus from leaving the scene. So as you can see, right? Forget the people who, I know it's Saturday, but maybe need to get to work or have somewhere to be. Their freaking kid's soccer game, I don't know. Well, no one can get anywhere apparently now because the quote-unquote mostly peaceful protesters get in the road here and they try to stop this moving bus, okay, as you can see. Right there, they are barricading themselves in front like complete idiots. And keep in mind, this is at about 1 p.m. Pacific time where you already had this chaos breaking out. And it's like, if you were Trump yesterday, you have to look at the situation and say, gee, what do I think is going to happen, right? You had a bunch of violence on Friday. Saturday morning, it shows no signs of stopping. In fact, it's only getting worse. What would the alternative solution be? And I want to be very clear about that. Well, unlike 2020, okay, where we waited for, in Minnesota, right, Governor Tim Walz has to send in the National Guard. We know what the situation is going to be, which is the Democrats will not send in the National Guard till half the city's burnt down. They've already done that. And that, by the way, that's evident by the fact that Gavin Newsom is today having a meltdown over this. And so, again, reiterating that this is not the summer of love. This is not 2020 anymore. What is Trump saying? He's saying, I see where this is going. We're going to send in the National Guard before things get too out of hand. I mean, arguably they already are out of hand, but too out of hand. Now, that in mind, you also see yesterday out of Paramount as rioters in Los Angeles are waving foreign flags, which, I'll say something about that in a second, but are now setting American flags on fire in the middle of the street. Of course, we're being so often told that the illegal aliens, guys, are Americans just like us. They're hardworking, America-loving people. They love this country. They just want an opportunity. And yet, every protest of people seemingly to stand up for these illegal aliens is not waving the American flag. In fact, they explicitly refuse to do so. Keep in mind, they're burning the American flag. No, notice the amount of course, foreign flags that you so often see. Okay, other images, I'm sure many people have already noticed this, but this is straight out of The Purge, right? You got this guy on a dirt bike waving the Mexican flag who just started a fire, and he's doing like donuts around this car. Other images, as you can see here, foreign flag, American flag upside down, bunch of foreign flags. And I do have to say, right, that this is not the so-called behavior of hardworking, family-loving immigrants that are just as American as you or I. Right, which is, of course, what we're being told, right? These are mostly peaceful protesters. These illegal aliens are amazing people. The people protesting are just sticking up for their community. Well, where is their community? Because it doesn't seem to be here. I know it's indistinguishable these days, but it turns out Los Angeles is not a foreign country. It's still technically part of the United States. So where is that community? I want to note this. This is not the behavior of so-called immigrants even. This is the behavior of invaders, okay? Only invaders would come to a country, wave foreign flags while burning the American flag, and start hurting people, start committing violence, start attacking the authorities of that country. That is, again, literally the behavior of invaders down to the last detail. Between the violence, between the foreign flags, the foreign loyalties, apparently what they want to turn this country into, I'm not exactly sure, the disdain for the country they're invading, everything here is completely obvious. This is an invasion, and I remember back, of course, to the 2018 midterms around that time when Trump was, excoriated. They said, how dare Trump refer to these migrant caravans as an invasion? How dare, even in 2022, 2023, how dare you call Joe Biden's border an invasion? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I do have to say, I'm not exactly sure how Democrats think these protests are going to help them or they're providing a good look for their party going into the future. But let it be said, to 2026, this is the Democrat campaign platform. This image right here, that image right there. Same thing, by the way, with Gavin Newsom, considering he fully is intent on owning these riots and defending these people down to his last breath, even though he's trying to be the moderate with the podcast now. So keep in mind, right? Because I'm sure Gavin is going to emerge as a strong 2028 candidate eventually. This picture right here represents Gavin Newsom's leadership, Gavin Newsom's California. If people somehow forgot the images of the state burning to the ground because of his environmental mismanagement, then let this right here be an even more stark image of what America is, subject to if Gavin Newsom had his way. As you can see, there's the zoomed out photograph, by the way. And I once again want to reiterate, according to the Democrats, this situation already, as you've seen, did not warrant the National Guard, right? It's a needless escalation. Everything is fine. The protests are mostly peaceful. In fact, some are arguing they're entirely peaceful. How dare the feds escalate the situation? As they keep on saying, they're escalating, guys. They're needlessly being provocative. Oh yeah, you look at this image, by the way, during the daytime. Yeah, no reason for the National Guard. Look at this. Look at this. They're saying everything is fine. Gavin Newsom and LAPD have it all under control. No need for the feds to get involved. It's like, okay, if you don't want the National Guard in your city, then maybe get your situation under control. But oh wait, that they can't. So it's just amazing, right? Mostly peaceful, fiery, but mostly peaceful protests. No need for the National Guard. And as you can see, by the way, the situation just gets significantly worse later into the night. Okay, because they said that no National Guard is necessary. Again, let's reiterate here. Why do we think that Trump deployed the National Guard? The answer is pretty simple. Because we saw where this was going, okay? You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand, having seen the situation a million times, usually like the second, third to fourth and fifth day of the riots are the worst. And it wasn't going to stop with just assaulting law enforcement or breaking glass or starting fires as if that were not enough already. No, you knew you were going to see a lot more of it. And it's pretty notable here that by the middle of the night last night, LA looks like a total war zone. I mean, look at some of these images, as you can see, of the rioting, okay? No need for National Guard, guys. Everything is fine. Trump is just fear-mongering. He's trying to institute authoritarianism with it. Look at this. Look at it. It looks like the Purge, right? It literally looks like the Purge. So, yeah, this is the situation you see in LA. And of course, you got these so-called peaceful protesters as, they've literally resurrected that term, by the way, mostly peaceful protesters. As you know, mostly peaceful protesters build shields behind police so they can't shoot tear gas or munitions. And they're chucking things, they're throwing projectiles, all this. Mostly peaceful protests, guys. Look at this. Completely out of control, right? And like I said, you want to talk about the invasion, the optics, when we call it an invasion? Okay, look at this. You got people behind shields. I know it looks like an ancient invasion, but still, you got this Roman Praetorian Legion or something, or Centurion Legion, okay? They're behind these shields. Someone is on the flank freaking waving a flag. These look like ancient battle tactics, by the way, because they are. This, again, is the behavior not of immigrants. This is how invaders act. As you can see, though, explosions now reported in the streets of Los Angeles as the standoff intensifies. Again, the peaceful protest here. The peaceful protest that Trump is fear-mongering about. These are hard-working, community-loving individuals. And, of course, who could forget? Would it really be, guys, a Democrat peaceful protest if you did not include a little bit of looting, of course, being the case? And yes, that is exactly what is going down here, as rioters are now looting stores in Los Angeles while the police are completely missing in action. And, to be totally fair to them, maybe they're missing in action because they literally are stretched that thin. They're literally across the whole city. People are starting riots. People are burning fires and all this. But again, guys, keep in mind, Gavin Newsom, Karen Bass, they have the situation under control. Totally, right? We definitely don't need National Guard. Trump is just a provocative authoritarian by doing all that. Very interesting, right? And I'm sure, by the way, the store manager is going to be the one who faces charges, not the looters themselves, right? Remember, Gavin Newsom went out and said that that's a myth. Looting is not legal in California, and it never has been. We'll explain this video right here, right? Typical day, by the way. I don't even know if that's news. I think that is typical behavior of Los Angeles. And people are just starting to notice it. So they're like, oh, why are they looting? They're always looting. But nonetheless, okay. That said, guys, now let's get into the reaction of the Democrat politicians. Because hopefully we've shown you ample enough images, sights, and sounds, of course, to get an understanding of why the National Guard was necessary. And yet you see the response here from, for instance, Congressman Dave Min. a Democrat here out of Orange County. So keep in mind, he comes out of like a purple, not super Republican or Democrat district. Okay, so swing district. Keep that in mind. He says, as the LAPD is reporting, the protesters are being peaceful. The protesters, guys, look at all these peaceful look at this peaceful protests. I mean, come on. I've never seen a protest more peaceful, okay? As LAPD is reporting the peace. Maybe you know why LAPD is reporting that? Because they're nowhere to be found, right? That's why they're saying it's peaceful. Anyways, he goes on to say, this is not a rebellion or invasion. There is no legal basis, including under 10 U.S. Code 12046, for Trump to take over California's National Guard. Well, actually, there is. You may remember during the era of segregation, for instance, presidents can deploy the National Guard without governor's approval under certain contexts. And yes, I don't know, maybe the fact that they're literally fighting the police with shields and foreign flags like this is 200 BC or something, maybe that does constitute an invasion. I'm just saying here. But as you can see, right, people, of course, respond with total ridicule towards Representative Dave Min because you know what they did? They responded with the actual videos of what is going on in Los Angeles, and it's pretty undeniable. Like, for instance, okay, check out this situation right here. According to them, this is a peaceful protest.
Let's hope that no one is hurt and no one is injured and it doesn't escalate from here. Look at the flag. Yeah, Guy, I see
there it is.
You pointing
Mexican
it out.
flag can,
this is criminal activity that I hope is people are held accountable for. And I'm talking about the riots right here.
Where are the cops?
Yeah, where are they?
Where are the cops? Well, the answer is very simple. The cops are nowhere in sight, which is why they're saying the protests are being peaceful, okay? They're watching a YouTube video from like 1964 or something. They're like, look at the people, they're being peaceful, guys. It's just unbelievable, completely out of control, right? Peaceful protest. What pretext could Trump possibly have to send in the National Guard? I mean, other videos, of course, you saw here, right? There's a video yesterday out of Fox News showing intense video of a Border Patrol agent's perspective as their vehicle is pelted with rocks. But again, apparently that is, peaceful protesting, as everyone knows. Now let's get into the lunatic, the idiot himself, Gavin Newsom, because as you can see, what's his response to the whole thing? By the way, Mr. Moderate 2028 candidate, supposedly. He goes out and says, the federal government is taking over the California National Guard and deploying 2,000 soldiers in Los Angeles, not because there is a shortage of law enforcement, but because they want a spectacle. Not because there's a shortage of law enforcement, Gavin Newsom claims, right? Everything's fine. Law enforcement is handling it, which of course begs the question, as they brought up, where are the police in this video? Nowhere to be found. No shortage of law enforcement, though, right? Law enforcement definitely has it under control, guys. 100%. You look at the video, where's the video of them looting? Yeah, no law enforcement here, but no shortage, guys. They're fine. LAPD is handling this so well. Right? And as you can see, the responses here is pretty straightforward. ALX says, no, it's actually because your state is an out-of-control sanctuary for criminals. You don't have anything under control from your, lavish mansion. Wait, so you're admitting these aren't simply peaceful protesters now? Well, you'll notice the pivot here for, later on. But as you can see, Gavin Newsom goes on to say, right, the Secretary of Defense is now threatening to deploy active duty Marines on American soil against its own citizens. This is deranged behavior. And this is, again, the narrative they're trying to paint. They're trying to say this is Tiananmen Square, this is what authoritarians do, this is fascism. So Gavin, though, I have a simple proposition to you. And your supporters and your voters, by the way, who are, of course, out there doing this, right? Just keep in mind, your voters. Have you guys tried not rioting? Have you tried that? Have you tried not being violent? Have you tried not burning down your city? Have you tried not assaulting law enforcement? No, they haven't done any of those things, right? Because this is the exact agenda. Democrats want to downplay everything that's going on with the actual protest just to say, oh, Trump is escalating. He's sending in the National Guard. He's an authoritarian. He's a fascist. As you'll see here from Adam Schiff, his statement is even more stupid in a second. But it's also like, it really is a double-edged sword with them. Because for a fact, if Trump didn't do this last night and LA burned to the ground, as it kind of already did, but, even worse maybe, let's say, do you think the Democrats would be like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Maybe we should. No, absolutely not, right? What they would have done is blame Trump for the violence, as they did in 2020, by the way, right? So it's like, it's damned if you do, damned if they don't, because, in 2020, Trump was trying to deploy the National Guard. Tim Walz is like, no, I don't want to do it, eh? And then what do they do, right? They don't blame Tim Walz for the riots, they blame Trump, right? They called him Bunker Don and all this stuff. But anyways, going on, here you have Adam Schiff saying the Trump administration's calling on the National Guard without the authorization of the governor is unprecedented. Well, again, maybe it's because the governor, much like all you Democrats, your modus operandi is to basically let half of your city burn to the ground and then you do something. And you know what we're saying? We're saying this time around, how about let's stop situations from getting completely out of control. Forget before they get out of control, but maybe while they're getting out of control, right? Maybe the city doesn't have to be halfway burnt down to finally say, send in the National Guard now that there's nothing left to protect, okay? This action is designed to inflame tensions, sow chaos, and escalate the situation. If the Guard is needed to restore peace, the governor will ask for it. Well, as we saw in 2020 and we see right now, no, the governor won't actually. The governor would just allow the state to get burned to the ground, which he's done in more ways than one, I will say, okay? Nonetheless, but continuing down this path will erode trust in the National Guard and set a dangerous precedent for the unilateral misuse of the Guard across the country. Well, as you also saw, by the way, on January 6th, it turns out congressional Democrats are not very keen on deploying the National Guard in very obvious situations where you need it. So I don't know what it is with their party. They have this, repeated trend of being a little apprehensive about law and order, we'll say. But nonetheless, violence must stop, and we need to keep focused on protecting fundamental rights. There's nothing President Trump would like more than a violent confrontation with protesters to justify the unjustifiable. Invocation of the Insurrection Act or some form of, there it is, guys, martial law. Martial law, that's what they're saying, right? I mean, surely, because you've never seen the National Guard deployed to stop rioters before. This is martial law. Apparently also after a hurricane, after an earthquake, when the National Guard goes in, martial law, guys, martial law. Now, you can see from other Democrat lawmakers out of LA, for instance, Representative Norma Torres says about these ICE raids, ICE, get the F out of LA, in a deranged video, by the way, while she's in an airplane. So it's like you got these random poor people just trying to, do their flight, get there safely, and then you got this deranged, crazy-eyed individual who's a politician in the middle of that flight saying the following.
ICE, get the fuck out of LA so that order can be restored.
Get out of LA so that order can be restored. What an absolute lunatic. All these people, absolute lunatics, guys. So that order can be restored. Oh yeah, because you guys are doing such a good job, right? LA local Democrats, California Democrats, you guys are doing such an amazing job. Check it out here as Los Angeles City Council member Eunice Hernandez actually calls for the escalation of riots against the ICE agents. So guys, let's keep in mind, right? This is not an issue where the Democrats are even remotely condemning these protests or making a big deal out of it. They're actually doing exactly what they accuse Trump of, right? Fueling the flames, pouring gasoline on the fire, and that is no exception from this deranged LA City Council member, by the way.
They know how quickly we mobilize. That's why they're changing tactics. Because community defense works and our resistance has slowed them down before. And if they're escalating their tactics, then so are we. When they show up, we gotta show up even stronger.
So while they're already burning things, looting, assaulting officers, tearing down vehicles, burning American flags, creating barricades and throwing stuff, apparently that's not enough, according to her. Actually, they need to escalate the tactics even more. A sitting LA City Councilwoman, by the way, just outright not even making excuses for it, calling actually for more of the same situation that you have been seeing. Now, let's talk, of course, about individuals like Harry Sisson, complete idiot he is. But he goes on to say, right, OMG, a Black Hawk helicopter has landed in California carrying dozens of boxes of ammunition, less lethal weaponry. So keep in mind, but he's talking about ammunition, but we're talking about non-lethal munitions. Okay, crowd control, by the way. But you got to include the word ammunition, right, to make it sound like that's a 5.56 rounds. No, it's not. It's You're talking about tear gas, rubber bullets, things like that. But anyways, you see these tanks with flammable labels on the side as if they were getting ready for a major battle. This is really bad, he says. So apparently, the rioting is not really bad. The violence is not really bad. It's the response to it. It's the fact that someone in this country wants there to actually be order on the streets and cities to not be set on fire. So anyways, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Now, despite all of the screeching and whining and crying about, you didn't have Gavin Newsom's permission to do it, oh, this and that, I would like to note that in at least a minimal capacity, honestly, I have one criticism of the administration, which is when it came to deploying the National Guard, it probably should have done sooner. Right? It should have been done Friday night. It should have been done in a larger scale. But nonetheless, you can see in this video here as finally, right? And you see these protesters outside. I believe that's a federal building. National Guard comes out swinging. They are, dispersing the crowd and all of that. And there you have it. So anyways, guys, here's a situation out of Los Angeles. Again, Gavin Newsom clearly has things so under control. How could Trump wants to institute martial law, guys. Again, have you tried not rioting? Have you tried not committing violence? Of course not. And this is, again, the behavior of invaders. But with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.